Welcome again to another episode of Principal Matters Podcast, everyone. I am Dr. Jen Schwanke, and I am here with a longtime friend of mine and a highly regarded educator and author for ASCD. I am back with Principal Kafele. And listeners, you may recall that we talked to Principal Kafele not too long ago, but we're back because he has another book out. So welcome, my friend. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm on fire. I'm good. I'm ready to get to this new year.
You know, I'm sure people have said this to you before. You have the best radio voice. You know that? And it's kind of you're the trifecta. You can write, you can speak, and you have a radio voice. So our listeners can get all of that from you today. So listeners, just a quick summary of who we have here with us today. Principal Kafele is a highly regarded urban educator from New Jersey for over 20 years. He served as an elementary teacher, assistant principal, high school principal, and then became the author and renowned speaker he is today. So he has a new book out, and that title is What is My Value Instructionally to the Teachers I Supervise. That was recently released, and we're going to talk in detail about it today. I see it behind you on the screen, Principal Kafele. And what I love, this ASCD did a beautiful job graphically because the title just shouts out at you.
Yeah.
And so we'll have to talk about that too. So before we get into questions, listeners, I just want to point out too, you can check out Principal Kafele's website or any of his 13 books.
14.
14. Oh, this makes 14. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're up to another one. So includes 7 ASCD bestsellers, including some of my favorites: the Teacher 50, the Principal 50, the Assistant Principal 50, and the Equity and Social Justice Education 50. You also are the creator and host of the popular AP and New Principals Academy, which you live stream every Saturday morning. And you've gotten a lot of rewards. You got the Milken Educator Award as
Oh,
various
we're right now.
yeah. Oh, so exciting. And I think you recently had an interview with other Milken Award winners. So I want to talk about that. I have so many things to talk
Yeah.
about. So let's
Even
open up.
we
Yeah.
had the founder on last Saturday, Lowell Milken.
Nice. So tell me about that. I mean, we're just going to dig in, listeners.
Yeah.
I've told you about it. Tell me about getting these incredible educators together. Was that just an idea you had one
Yeah,
day?
receiving the Milken Award was a real blessing for me on so many levels. And and then the further blessing was, there's a forum every year. It used to be in different cities, but primarily in LA. Now I think it's back in LA, which is where the Milken headquarters are. And they do a forum for the recipients of each year. So this usually roughly 50, give or take. And every year since I won it in 2009, I've been invited to be one of the speakers, the keynote speaker at the forum. So it's a big deal. So I get to meet a lot of Milken educators beyond what the average Milken educator would know, because I'm in that space every year since 2009, and here we are 2025. So I've met a lot of So I said, wow, I know so many of them. And then we have other ways that we communicate
Right.
in terms of forums online. So I said, let me devote January to them. So that's what we did. But it's just, I don't like going over 3 guests at a time, because then no one hardly gets to speak. So,
Right.
so we do 3 each day. But then I said, but I never had Lowell on here, and I know him, because of seeing him every year. So I reached out and said, I'd, love to have you on, just you and I, one-on-one. And he obliged me. And hence there he was. There's over 3,000 Milken winners now, and since 1987. So it was really great to sit right here and talk
Right.
to him. Um, he's an important man,
Yeah. He's an important man.
beyond
And
beyond education.
think of the difference he's made. You know, he has truly like you said, it was a huge difference for you professionally, but also I'm sure
Yeah,
personally, and then all the
yeah,
other award recipients as well.
that's right. Yeah, it was huge for me. I
Yeah.
needed it. It wasn't just something nice that happened. And at that space, within that space and time of my life, I needed that award. And
Yeah.
this is when I got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when they called my name, because I didn't know it was gonna be me. I thought it was gonna be one of my
Right.
teachers. So I just kind of put my head down and quick prayer, quick
Right.
meditation, while my entire school was giving me a standing ovation.
Right.
Um,
Oh, that moment, you probably keep reliving it. And then you picked up your pen and you have really, touched
yeah,
so many educators as an author, but also as a speaker. I've heard you speak multiple times. One of the other things, too, I want to make sure our listeners know is this is a really nice man that I'm talking to today. You came, Principal Kafele, once I was presenting at NASSP, and you were very, very busy at that conference, and you stopped by my session and listened and just said, just the right encouraging words too. So I think one of your missions is to lift up others as well,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
really let people know you can do this. You have an important voice. So talk to us about not only your professional journey as an inspirer and as a leader, but also as someone who's kind of a mentor, a hidden mentor. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that question too. We're all getting older every day.
Hmm.
And somewhere, somehow, some way, I became 64. You know, and in this particular year, I'll be 65. Um, but as I was getting older, one of the things that I was noticing was that the younger speakers, the younger educators were gravitating to me.
Hmm.
Um, it's extremely noticeable within the African American community, but it's not confined to the African American community. It's across racial backgrounds, and people gravitating, and me taking on that role as mentor, as advisor, right?
Hmm.
Turn that off as advisor, just giving whatever advice I could. But in doing so, that fed into a lot of the books I've written and also a lot of the video stuff that I do, particularly when you think about the interview videos I've done and the hundreds of people out here, if not thousands, who are in these
Hmm.
jobs, as they tell me, because they watch those videos. So that's once again me just, giving back, doing, as I would say, God's work, and
Right.
being blessed for it in return.
Why do you think that I'm going way off script? I had sent you
That's
some
all right.
questions ahead of time, but it's you. I'm just going to ask the questions I want to ask. Why do you think so many teachers are hesitant or insecure or anxious about going into leadership? Why, when you talk to mentees, what's holding the youth back?
Yeah, it's because from the outside looking in, when that teacher sees the principal, you or the assistant principal, you see what you see,
Mm.
and you really don't know anything else about it except for what you see. So the average teacher in my schools over the years, when they would see me, they would think I'd never want to do this because you seem so consumed by
Hmm.
what you do. What they did not realize was the volume of empowering others, the volume of delegation. Like the teacher that may be saying, "Man, you got so much on your plate," may not realize that this may be a teacher that I have assigned certain responsibility, but may not realize that I've done the same for others. Right. So
Right.
they're seeing it, and it just looks overwhelming from where they sit. But
Right.
if it's someone that has an inkling of I think I just might want to be an administrator, then I'll take them under my wing. And then they'll see, no, it's not what you think it is. In your first maybe 3 years, yeah, it might be everything you thought it was in terms of it being overwhelming. But when you learn it and learn that you've got human capital, which is a milking word, you've got human capital all over that building. But the question
Right.
is, how are you tapping into that human capital? And if one never learn, if one's a lone ranger and it's just you, you'll never maximize your potential in this work. But when you learn how to when you learn how to tap into others via you being someone that they want to be tapped into by you,
Right.
right? Because if you don't present yourself in a way that they want to have that kind of rapport, that kind of relationship with you, then it's not going to happen anyway. But if you're someone that folks they look up to you, they like you, they admire you, and they want to be close to you, they want to work with you, then you can build that team, you can build that community. And by the time I got to the latter half of my years as a principal, I was not the textbook principal. I was doing the things that I wanted to do. right? So I wanted to be solely an instructional leader. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to spend my days coaching and observing. And
Hmm.
when I got to the second half of my 14 years of leadership, I had a ritual. I do my morning message, particularly when I was in my office versus when I was in my gym. So I do my message, and then I walk out of my office and take a look at my head secretary sitting right to my left. And I would say to her every day, I'll see you at about 1 or 2 o'clock this afternoon. If you need me, call me. What that meant was no one's going to see me in this office. But within that, because one of the viewers could be confused by that to say, well, what about others that need you? Well, the teachers understood, the parents understood, community leaders understood. How? Because I trained everybody. The
Right.
students understood. I needed the students to know why I was in their classrooms, not the specificity by which the teachers would know, because I don't want to undermine the teachers, but I wanted the students to know that when you see me in your classroom, I'm ensuring that your education is world class. So I'm
Hmm.
just observing that. I don't want them guessing like, why is he here? No, no,
Right.
no. You see me in there, that's why I'm here. So now
Yes.
when you get yourself jammed up in trouble because of behavior that you could have controlled, I just want you to know that when you're taking that walk to the office, you were pulling either me or an assistant principal out of a classroom to deal with you.
Yeah.
You to know that.
Right.
Them
Right.
kids heard, they heard me. They heard.
Right.
I said,
So
oh,
I'm assuming that that passion for instructional leadership is what led to this book. So again, the title, listeners, is What is My Value Instructionally? There you go, for the teachers I supervise. So love the cover. I think it's just not only beautifulully done, but it looks a little like you too, which is probably on
yeah.
purpose.
Well,
So talk to us about that.
I was part of the design.
Yeah. And
Not
that's
only me in the
a tip.
picture, but I mean, I had input.
Yeah.
We went
Yeah. And
back and
that,
forth for quite a while.
for our listeners, usually an author has very little input
Yeah.
on a cover, but ASCD is a wonderful publisher, and I'm sure they thought, let's get Principal Kafele at the table here. So, talk to us about this book. This is all of your books are inspiring. All of them are meant to be, digestible, practical, immediately applicable strategies. Tell us about this book.
I will, and just for context for the audience, we wanted the book to be
Mhm.
consistent with this one as far as the cover. Is my school a better school because I lead it? So, so hence there you go.
There you
Right.
go. Listeners, I'm taking a picture. That's what he's saying.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
going to see this.
That's
Yes.
right. Yeah, I forgot. We just audio, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So the book itself, instructional leadership is my area of focus. I would dare say, I'm not ashamed to say this, it is more so my focus than it was when I was a principal. And that's because
Mhm.
as a consultant, I got to get out into the world and I got to see some things. And I said, man, what about those youngsters, those young Principal Kafeles? Now, what does that mean? Some of your audience may not even know my story. Maybe many of them won't know. I'm a 5-year high school student. I'm dealing with trauma. I don't care about school. School
Mhm.
is not important to me. Life is not important to me. So I'm doing nothing. So I attend 4 schools. Why? Because my mother shifted me all over New Jersey trying to find the right fit. And then we finally get to a school where we're going to live for a while in another part of Jersey, and they said, well, you got to repeat a year because you got no credits. Fine. So I repeated a
Fine.
year, yeah, fine, but did nothing. I graduate a year late. And then for the next 5 years, I do nothing.
Mm,
Nothing. I notice all my friends I'm growing up with, they're graduating from college and doing things with their lives. And I'm living in a 2-bedroom apartment with my mother, unemployed. I said, Mom, I got to do something. I said, I'm going to go to college. I just need you to pay the tuition, right? But she scraped and figured it out. But then I said, but the second thing, Mom, I don't have a dream. I don't know what to study because there's nothing I want. That's how backwards I was back then. How lost I was would be a better word. And
mhm.
She said, well, why don't you study marketing? And I said, well, what is it? And she told me what best she could tell me. And I studied marketing. But when I got there, and I'm saying I'm using this as a bridge to get to that question, I
Right.
stumbled on African American history. The day I got there, the first day,
Wow.
became this voracious reader. I feel confident in saying I probably was reading more books outside of my major than anybody on that campus because I was reading a book a week,
Uh-huh.
right? If not two, because I was not sleeping. I'm young. I'm thinking I'm a machine. I'm just
Right.
reading around the clock this African American history. And what it's doing is it's changing me. By the turn of each page, it's changing me
Mhm.
because it's introducing me to a history that I didn't know existed. So my coursework, therefore, became easy for me because now I've got a heightened sense of pride in self. And the coursework is like, okay, well, I'm a product of greatness. So how dare me squander these
Mhm.
courses? So I'm passing everything with an A and then going back to my reading. So I'm saying that to say this. Fast forward to today. There are young Principal Kafeles in every classroom in America that's not an AP honors or gifted and talented classroom. They're all over the place. In other words, these youngsters who have the capacity to achieve big things but have no clue, right?
Mhm.
So the question for me became, well, how are we reaching that kid? That young me that my peers graduate in 78 and I come out in 79 who and not convinced that I had the credits to come out. I always tell people they just say get out, and probably fudge the paperwork to justify it, right? Because I wasn't changing. By senior year, I wasn't doing anything different from freshman year. I was the
Mhm.
same guy. So what about that kid? Well, as leaders, to get right to the question now, if I'm not instructional leader, instructional coach, I could go a full year and not even know that that kid exists. I may know that there's some apathetic kids in my school, but in terms of how we reach that kid, I'm not in position to provide strategy because I'm engaged in all these other ancillary things that happen in tertiary things that happen in schools. So young Principal Kafele, who has the capacity to be valedictorian or salutatorian, he or she, they're overlooked.
Mhm.
So I graduated summa cum laude. I never got under an A in undergraduate school, but I didn't know I had that when I was in high school, right? In middle school. I didn't know. But when I read that history, it changed my thinking. It shifted my
Right.
thinking. And then I said, I can do anything. And went on and
Right.
did things, wrote the 14 books, got the Hall of Fame of awards in the National Alliance of Black School Educators and the East Orange, New Jersey Hall of Fame, and so many others, the Milken Award. No one knew that was in me.
Right.
So
Can I?
therefore I wrote this book to say, hey, leader, we can't miss any of them.
Right.
But if you're not in that classroom and doing that coaching, then we probably will miss a lot of them.
It's so true. I see it too many times. We identify and label students so early, and then that is what they become, and we're missing them. You're right, we're missing them. And instructional leadership is more than knowing content. It's more than scope and sequence. It is about whether that instruction actually has a landing spot with students. Can I ask a question? Do you still
Yeah.
have your mom? Is your mom still
Yeah.
with us?
She just turned 90 in
Oh,
DC.
she tell me how proud she is. Tell me,
Oh,
tell
she's the
me.
biggest fan. The AP and New Principals Academy, my Saturday live stream, we're going into week number 249 this Saturday. Well, she's watched all
Oh,
248 live.
that
Yeah,
is,
she
yeah. And
hasn't
she
she
scraped
hasn't missed.
together that tuition for you, and now
Yeah,
she's watching your live record. That is just amazing.
yeah,
I wanted you to say she's still with us because I
yeah.
wanted you to tell me she's seeing your success. What I
She's
loved, yeah, what I love too about that story that you just told is the importance that reading has played in your life, to find that African American history and then to turn yourself into a reader. And like you said, you changed with every page that was turned. What a compelling message in a world where people are forgetting the importance of reading and really focusing on what words can tell us. And so that's going to lead me to my next question. I'm teaching actually a class right now on instructional leadership, and over from aspiring principals, I hear, how can I oversee instruction for content I don't know? I'm an
Yeah,
English teacher. How can I tell a Spanish teacher how to get better? I
yeah,
taught third grade. What do I tell a band instructor? So talk to us about that little quandary.
yeah, yeah. That's normal too. In fact, that's even addressed in the book extensively. One of the things that I learned, whether it be in grad school or more so just practically on the job, nobody is going to know all that content.
Right.
If you teach elementary, yeah, you probably can know enough to know what's going on in the classroom. But once you get in the secondary, at the middle school and high school levels, I'm not expecting the principal. You're conversant in algebra 2, physics, chemistry, Spanish 2, U.S. history 4. No, it's not going to happen. What you
Mhm.
need to be proficient at is pedagogy, right? Great instruction. See, between your relationships with central office supervisors, if you're secondary, your department heads in your school, or even just the teachers themselves, I decided I wanted to know content as best I could. So I'm literally studying some of this content. But that's not something that I say to folks that one needs to do, right? It's not going to hurt, but you got to know pedagogy. But you also have to make great usage of those supervisors at central office, supervisors, directors, whomever, who do know the content.
Mhm.
And then if you're secondary, your department heads within the school as well. To those aspiring folks, nah, no need to feel like you have to go in there knowing the Spanish, right? If you don't speak
Right.
Spanish, or knowing the chemistry, if you don't know the chemistry, what you need to know is pedagogy. And what does that
Right.
look like? Right. And then you've got the others to fill in those blanks as it relates to the content.
Right. So, a big concern these days is behaviors, just spiking behaviors that teachers are, crying out, frustrated. I can't get to the instruction because of behaviors.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling with that question myself. And I think it's a little, sometimes I want to say, well, how are you engaging the students? And that feels, it doesn't land right because it's so insulting and condescending, right? So I don't want to say that. Um, how are you advising teachers and principals when they talk to you about behaviors?
Yeah. I'm talking, and I'm probably talking to leaders, principals, and APs more
Right.
about that than I am the teachers. But I'll give this answer from this leadership lens, and then I'll even touch on the teacher. Um, I want you to think about an athletic team, the football team. They're in the locker room, and they put on their pads and their uniform, and then it's time to go out onto the field. But before they go out, their head coach, he's got something to say. It could be rah rah, it could be low key, it could be anything in between, but he's got something to say. Even though he's been in their ear all year round, all week long with practice and so forth, it's game day now. He's got one more word to say, although he'll be coaching throughout the course of the game. He or she, right, be coaching throughout the course of a game. Well, I took from that as a principal. I said, that coach is setting up one last tone, laying one last foundation before the athletes walk out onto the field. Most of the time when I'm in a school that has those challenges that you just discussed, when I go into a school on a school day and I'm just kind of circulating the building, I don't tell the principal what I'm going to be looking for. I never do. We'll do that when we have our meeting later on in the day, the debriefing and so forth. But what I am looking for in my mind, I want to hear how that principal starts the day, right? So I would say in my world, about maybe 85, 90% of the time, I'm not going to hear the principal's message, right? And I always make the distinction between the morning announcements and the morning message. They're not the same thing. So I'm waiting to hear what is the principal going to say to the school today? Now, with me, because I led some very challenging schools in my years, I didn't always rely on a public address system. I would literally have the school in my gym that became the culture of the school or my auditorium, depending on the size of the school, and my message would be heard there. But I created a culture where the only thing you could hear in that gym would be either me or a pin drop on the floor.
Right.
Yeah, it was that quiet, and I got something to say. And it was never something to say about discipline. I'm never going to start my day that way. I got something to say about your, meaning the students, your greatness, what your capacity, what you have the ability to achieve. So in other words, what I'm saying to you and your listeners is that I'm creating a culture where every morning our principal is the pastor, the spiritual leader, the head coach to deliver that important message. And so let me give you the translation to that because there's so much more because the so much more would be the message itself. Like, what am I saying? But the translation, I'm not dealing with discipline and all that kind of stuff because I have set a tone. I've laid a foundation. And I don't mean I set a tone with like punishment, like, and if you do no, we ain't doing that. I'm in there smiling. I'm in there doing like as if I was a motivational speaker. I'm giving a motivational message to my students and staff. They hear it to say, we got this. And some of those days I'm showing them test scores of the suburban schools versus what the urban schools are doing. I'm putting it on a bar graph, have the audacity to show those scores because some people are never going to do that. Politically, they think it's suicide. And I'm showing like this what y'all doing. This what you and kids who look like you, us, are doing. But you get on that interstate highway and go up 10 minutes up to West Orange, New Jersey. Here's what they doing. You telling me you can't compete? My kids hear me, but I have to position myself in a way that I matter to them. Because if I don't matter, my words don't matter. So I want my words to matter that this leader believes in your possibility. And for that to translate into the classroom, not over like bypassing the teacher though. Because now the culture we develop, I need my teacher to reinforce the message, right? Bring your own message, but don't forget my message, right? Don't
Right.
forget the leadership, right? And
Right.
as we're doing that, that culture is shifting. Does it mean we were perfect? No. But does it mean we were unusual? Yes.
Right.
Right. For the environment upon which I'm at. I got gang infestation. That's what we are. By self-identification, we like 95% of my boys, Blood Crip, Great, Latin King, MS-13. That's who we are. But they got this principle that they believe in.
Right.
Right. So therefore we able to do the things that we did. So that's not the end all. But if I'm talking to a leader, I'm asking the question, how does your day begin? Because just like that football game is game day, well, every day that the children walk into the building is game day.
Right.
Every day.
Well, I'm hearing you say two things, and I think they're both extremely important. You said the words confidence, greatness, ability, belief, spirit. You matter. And I imagine that principal sharing that message to students, but I'm also imagining the students then projecting that back on the principal and the staff. A student thinking, I have confidence in you. I believe in you. Principal, you matter to me. So I've done a lot of reading about collective efficacy, and that's really what you're talking about there, Principal
Yeah,
Kafele. You're talking about the immense power of belief.
yeah,
It's more powerful than homework, then engagement, then parent support at home, then all kinds of things, just that belief. And I think that's why your work speaks so much to principals across the country and around the world, because you're not asking them to, you know, this isn't rocket science, don't fly to the moon, just believe
Yeah,
in your own ability. Sit in that confidence, sit in that greatness.
that's right. That's right. Just it's got to be in there. And as you use the right terminology, collective efficacy.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, yeah, you can go into a school and have teachers who don't believe in their own ability
Exactly.
to elevate the children of our school who come from particular zip codes, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the work is not just with the student. The work is with the teacher. So I always, so now going back to the conversation with leader, the other thing is I said, leader, your staff meetings, they can't be like this administrative minutia all day. It's like I
Right.
once email became a thing, I'm writing a bulletin on Sunday morning, which would have been my staff meeting content, and I'm gonna send it to you at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. You don't have to read it, obviously. I can't enforce that, but it's in your inbox. You read it when you want to, but make sure you read it before that staff meeting. And then when we have the staff meeting, we're talking teaching and learning. We're talking school climate, school culture, right? We're talking systems. We're talking those things that are going to make that school work. Those things that are going to ensure that each of those youngsters are striving to maximize their potential. I don't want to talk about the copier, the parts still missing. I don't want, the paper shortage, the supply still haven't come in. We're not going to spend time. That's a waste of time. We're going to talk about these youngsters that sit in our classrooms. What is it that we need to be talking about, and what is it that we need to be doing to maximize their potential?
One of my favorite stories about you. So, listeners, I've known Principal Kafele for 8 years now. When my first book came out, he was such a support and such a friend. You said to me, "Good job, young lady." You
Yeah.
said that to me, and it meant a lot to me. But
Um,
you have to tell our listeners, my favorite story is about your very first book. Tell them what it was called and how you sold it out of your car.
yeah, the Black Parents
I
Handbook.
love this story.
To educating your children
Yeah.
outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
I had an idea for a book, didn't know how it was going to become a book, pretended that, that I did, and just had my notepad, no computer, just pen and notebook, and wrote my book. It's in the basement now. Just wrote my book, and then once
Yeah.
I finished, now it's like, all right, let me have my wife and my mother proof it, and they did. All right, now what you gonna do? I have no idea. Uh, called called a few publishers, but they weren't interested. But there was a guy I was aware of. I didn't know him. He was in Virginia. He's still there, and he was a publisher, but he was a publisher, but that's it's loose. It's loosely
Right.
stated. He you still were paying for it, right? So anyway,
Right.
he had a book that taught you how to self-publish. So I bought the book from him. And I said, okay. So now I just had to raise a little bit of money, and we went on and printed a few copies, about 100 copies. I was sitting in my kitchen with my family, and I passed a hat around. I said, I need $1,000 for this initial printing, and they came up with it. We had a lot of people in the house. They came up with it. We had a little local printer down in Newark, and they printed the book, and I started selling it out of my car. I was driving different parts of Jersey and different parts of New York City, or taking the subway and bring a crate. Because after that first printing, the book took off. So we're printing more. So now we're not just doing 100 book runs. Now we're doing 500 books. And then finally it got to be too many for a little print shop. So someone turned me on to a book manufacturer, and now we were printing 5,000 copies per printing,
Right.
5 and 6,000. But I was still doing the same thing. And I might add, um, back in those days, we're talking 80s and 90s, you'd be hard pressed to find an unknown, unestablished African American author in your large chains. But in that era, you had what's called black bookstores all over the country. There were over 1,000. In your state, Ohio, there were many of them.
Hmm.
And I found a way to get in touch with all of them. So my full-time job So all I did was contacting bookstores, shipping books, doing radio interviews because on the one hand I'm doing all that groundwork to get in touch with these bookstores, but on the other hand I'm doing all this groundwork to find these radio stations. So the radio stations, and I'm talking about big FM stations, they were bringing me on. So I'm this young guy in my 30s, no, late 20s, early 30s, and I'm doing all these radio interviews with all these stations, and then even television shows. I was on network TV. There's a show in New York called Good Day New York. Comes on Fox every morning. It's been on for a million years. But then I found out it's not just in New York. There's Good Day Denver. There's Good Day Birmingham. There's Good Day
Yeah.
Atlanta, and so on. I sent press releases to all these producers of those shows, and I got on all of them, right? And live, so now I'm on these shows talking about that book and a second book I had written. And that just kind of, started building momentum for me. And then ultimately
Right.
I
Well, and
started writing for ASCD. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, and here's why I think that story is so critical to any educator, any, young person out there who has something to say. You got your no's
Yeah,
from publishers, and you decided that was going to actually be a yes, and you were going to publish this book yourself, and you were going to sell it out of your cart. And here's the thing, I think it'd be easy for someone who just met you to think, there's this guy and he writes for ASCD and he gets to go up and talk to thousands of people, and why him? Well, I think let's not forget all the hard work, the grit, the hustle, the taking a box of books on a subway into New York City, the writing the letters to news stations. It's a lot of work. And so I say that as a way to inspire
yeah,
anyone who has something to say.
yeah.
Don't let a no stop you from turning it into a yes. Like that's part of your gift is that inspiration.
I appreciate that. And I felt the need to on a regular basis, and I probably intensified it in over the past several years, that I need to tell that story. I need
Right.
them to know all of me, because I'm talking to educators.
Right.
So that me from the past
Right.
is sitting in your classroom. So I want them to
Exactly.
know that then when I decided I wanted to be this writer, this author is a better word, because I don't call myself a writer. I'm a practitioner who right shares his thoughts on
Yes.
paper. But I had to grind that out. Then I wanted to become a
Right.
speaker.
Right.
I had to so from
Exactly.
1986 to 2004, I'm speaking to empty cafeterias for years. One parent, five
Right.
parent, but I'm practicing on them. So
Right.
in
Yep.
ASCD
That's
two
right.
thousand four, I mean breakthrough, and I've been riding that wave ever since. We all waiting for that breakthrough, and I had mine
Right.
in 2004.
You had yours. Yep.
Yeah,
Well, listen, I know you're a busy man. I'm so grateful. Okay, listeners, I reached out to Principal Kafele and I said, "Listen, I know we just talked a few months ago. Come talk to me again." And you were so gracious and said,
yeah,
"Absolutely." So,
always.
thank you for that. Tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at principalkafele.com. Principalkafele.com. I'm sure you'll see the spelling. And all my social media is there. And
Yep.
I certainly want to invite you to my Saturday Academy. It's called the AP in New Principles Academy every Saturday morning at 10:55 Eastern Time. And Jen was one of my guests,
It was.
and
It was.
so many others. And we're live, so this will be, well,
Live.
say the
Yep.
number, but we've done 249 thus far. So there's, by the time you hear this, it might be 250 something. Yep. So come on and join me, folks.
Right.
And you can get the books.
Well, yeah, join him truly. Yeah, I
Yeah,
encourage any listener to go and join him. You will find it so inspiring. So thank you, my friend.
yeah,
I truly
yeah.
appreciate it, and Godspeed with the new book.
Thank you.